Did you know that there is a problem with the vlog on the Panasonic S1H? It's this thing called ghosting. Basically with fast moving objects, I'm not recording in vlog right now or else I could show you, but like with an arm moving around quick like this or something like that, when it moves, you can see almost in this outline kind of this shadowy, ghosting looking stuff. Now, I personally believe that this is something that Panasonic is gonna fix with a firmware update in the future, so I'm not really too worried about it, but it is something that's really good to be aware of. For someone like me, this really isn't a game breaker when it comes to the S1H, but because of this problem, there are a lot of people that are shooting in HLG as opposed to vlog, so it kind of made me wonder how vlog and HLG pair up against each other side by side, and what are some of the disadvantages and advantages to either of them. Now, I have some really exciting news. I don't know why I do this every time that I'm gonna be doing something exciting or something like that. I'm just meant to be a villain or something that just does this when something happens. To go along with this video, I am launching 7 different LUTs. And believe it or not, I'm kind of crazy or something, but I decided to release 2 of them for free. Can you hear my cat? And the 2 that I'm going to be launching for free is my Panasonic Vlog LUT as well as my Panasonic HLG LUT. The other 5 LUTs are a little bit different and I've been working on them for a while now. If you end up going to get them, you'll notice too that I've actually been using them secretly throughout my YouTube videos, and I've just been kind of stress testing them and making sure that they work the way that I want them to work. These LUTs are basically creative LUTs. These are designed to give you a look, so to say, because I wanted to make something for you guys that you not only could use with your Panasonic cameras, but also any other camera for that matter. Now don't worry, I'm going to be showing some examples of what the LUTs do and what they look like later on in the video, but if this is your first time here, my name's Dustin, your video tour guide, and please keep your arms and legs inside your chairs at all times. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. To start things off, I have to talk about a few things on the camera. When you're shooting in HLG, there are 3 different modes you can choose from. Shh, I'm trying to film a video. What do you think you are, huh? Are you the video tour guide? No, I'm the video tour guide. Cats. Mode 1 will prioritize your highlights so you don't overexpose, whereas mode 2 will prioritize your subject and give you more of a generalized view of the scene. I personally like to shoot on the last mode. I'd rather look at HLG just viewed as HLG. One other thing, I really tried to keep things consistent when I was exposing for these tests. I used a combination of tools like the luminance spot meter and waveform monitor. I personally like to try to expose so there is as much detail as possible in the image. Like for example, if my subject was exposed perfectly, but my background was overexposed from say the sun, I will lower my exposure even if it makes them darker because I just love to see all the detail in the sky. So keep that in mind while you're watching. And it's possible if you do some tests of your own, you may get different results based on your shooting style and how you expose, because it's quite possible that I don't technically expose correctly all the time. But I did try very hard to give a good comparison between the 2, so then you can decide which you prefer. I'm going to start showing the flat vlog first, and then use the nicest Rec 709 LUT from the Verican LUTs that you can download off of Panasonic's website and balance the image from there. Then basically do the same thing with HLG, but just balance the image so they look similar to each other based on the waveform monitor in Premiere. I also did dial back the nicest Rec 709 LUT to 65 because it was just way too red and ugly when I put it on at 100%. And I really wish I could have done this in Resolve, but I am super cheap and I don't actually own the licensed version of Resolve. And I know there's tricks that you can do to pull in 10-bit footage into the free version, but I just decided not to deal with that. But in the future, I plan to get a license because Resolve is just way better for grading. Can we all agree with that? Moving on. The first test I shot in the morning, and the biggest thing I noticed when comparing the 2 is skin tones. In Vlog, it seems to have much more red and pink in the image when you compare it to HLG. Keep in mind as well while you're watching, It is pretty cold where I am right now, so one reason that my skin may look a little more red is because it's chilly outside, and especially when you see the comparison at sunset. It was cloudy and I had already waited for 3 days for the sunset shot, but I was waiting just in case the clouds disappeared, which they did. Just look at my neck compared to my face if you want a more accurate reading of my skin tones for this shot. Overall though, I really did notice that Vlog tends to have more red, or maybe even a little more pink, than it did compared to HLG. This could be an advantage to HLG because it seems it is much more forgiving in your shadows. You can underexpose pretty heavily and raise your shadows without breaking the image or introducing more noise. This theme of red and pink kind of continues throughout the whole test. One thing I did notice is Vlog tended to do a better job was in the shot where I put a window in the background. Vlog seemed to do a better job showing more detail throughout the whole image, especially color, whereas HLG was much darker, even though exposure-wise, everything looked really similar on my waveform monitor. And I do remember this one was particularly tricky to expose, so I had the detail in the window when I was using HLG without losing the face in just total darkness. I was going to shoot this in actual studio lighting, but with everything going on, that kind of fell through. So you have to settle with me in my studio. All I did was just a simple 3-point lighting setup, and even in a studio scenario, I probably would have lit it similarly anyways. In the low light scenario, first off, can we just appreciate this image for a few minutes? So I shot this at 10,000 ISO, and look at it. It's incredible. There's barely any noise, and even the noise that's in it looks fantastic. I don't know about you, but that's another thing I love about the S1H is how good the noise looks. And even in HLG, like, bravo. This camera is awesome. This camera's just awesome, okay? I don't care. The Vlog ghosting, I don't care. This camera's awesome. Anyways, moving on to the candle light. I shot this one at 6400 ISO just because if you went any higher, you wouldn't really see the flames of the candles. I believe this was at about 4800 Kelvin as well, if you're curious. I personally like a more warm look with fire just since it seems to look more real, but you can definitely see how much more red and pink there is in the Vlog footage compared to HLG. And if that wasn't enough, I did shoot with my colored lights just to see how it looked. And notice just how much more red the Vlog shot is compared to the HLG footage. It's super interesting and something that I didn't really imagine to see when comparing the two. Now, let's kind of talk about my final thoughts. I don't know how this video is gonna play out, because as I was watching the footage, I didn't really know what to say when I was comparing the two, because when it comes down to it, I don't think it really comes down to which one is better. I believe it is more about which you prefer. As you can see, there are differences in the two when it comes to color with Vlog, seeming to have more red and pink in the image, whereas HLG is more orange than red looking. I did shoot these at Cinema 4K at 400 megabits per second, so you should have a ton of flexibility when it comes to color, whether you're shooting in Vlog or HLG, and could bring back that red if you want it to in HLG, or take it away in Vlog if you didn't want it. The biggest disadvantage right now, like I mentioned in the beginning, is the ghosting that happens in Vlog. Vlog and HLG are also, like most things on the camera, different tools for different needs, and depending on what you're shooting, it's up to you to make the decision on what will work best for you. All right, so I hope that footage kind of helped showing kind of the comparison in all those different lighting scenarios, but I want to take a look very quickly at the LUTs I've created. The first is my Vlog LUT and HLG LUT. Like I said earlier, these LUTs are not drag and drop LUTs. They are made to give you a good starting point no matter what scenario you are shooting in, and then it's up to you to make the changes as needed. Then my color LUTs are drag and drop and should be the last thing you add before you export. These color LUTs work for any camera and any kind of footage, with the exception that you will grade any log footage before adding one of these. There are 5 different looks to choose from. The first is called Grease, which basically desaturates everything and gives kind of a cool, moody look. Bloom kind of just makes everything pop a little bit more and has a slight blue hue to it. Green tea gives a slight muted green across the whole image, as well as a desaturated orange. Fusion is my take on the infamous orange and teal look. Basically, all the orange and teal LUTs I find basically destroy everything that's green in the image and really overdo the teal, so I made it much more subtle and less obvious. Then the last one is Dampen. Dampen is basically another take on Grease, but instead of desaturating most colors, it will basically dampen the colors and give kind of a warm hue to the image. Like I said, you can get my Vlog and HLG LUTs for free in the description below, and then my color LUTs are available for purchase. The really cool thing about my color LUTs as well, if you don't like the warm hue or the cool hue that it gives to the image, it's really easy to tweak it by just, adjusting your white balance a bit. If you do end up buying them, reach out to me on Instagram with some screen grabs of projects you're using them for. I've made my own looks in the past, kind of like these ones, but I've never released them for general public to use. And yes, I did work really hard on these, but I'm extremely curious how they will hold up to your shooting styles compared to mine. I have tested these color LUTs on Sony footage, Red footage, even footage straight out of the camera that's not Vlog or HLG, kind of like what you've seen in my YouTube videos, and I've gotten pleasing results, so don't worry, I'm pretty confident that they will work on yours. Going back to HLG versus Vlog, I'm really curious what you guys prefer. Do you prefer Vlog? Do you prefer HLG? Or are you like me and you use both? I personally still like to use Vlog as opposed to HLG. I've just used log footage much longer than I have HLG, so I'm much more comfortable with it. But after doing these tests and creating these LUTs, it really opened my eyes and saw how great of an option it is if I'm having too many problems with the ghosting in Vlog. Before we end too, I gotta show you guys this sweet light. Right here, this guy. If you watch my videos, you see me using these lights basically in every video. They're super cool because they're very portable, they're RGB, and even have scenes built into the lights, so you can do some really cool effects without having to hire 3 grips. This one was sent to me by Andy Cine, so thank you for that. And it's a great option to consider if you're in the market for some affordable lighting for your YouTube channel, your weddings you're shooting, interviews, basically any kind of production you may be shooting. Thank you, Andy Cine, for sending me the light. And if you want to check out that light, there is a link down in the description below. And with that, it's time to end. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a double thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, pick up some of my LUTs, merchandise, or better yet, subscribe to the channel since it's cheaper than all those other options. Man, this is I'm starting to sound like a YouTuber now with all these, plugs and promotions and products going everywhere. I'm sorry, but I guess it's just part of being a YouTuber. Links to everything is down in the description. But in the meantime, happy filming. Keep in mind as well while you're watching, it is pretty cold where I am right now. It's one reason that got an itch. Thank you, Andy Cine, for The really cool thing about my color LUTs as well is I'm gonna start showing the flat Vlog footage first and then I'm gonna start off by showing the flat Vlog footage. I'm going to show, Shh. Am I in focus?